Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to another installment of A Rebel Without Applause, coming to you as I always do from my little television studio apartment in the wood of the Holly. And today I have a very special guest, and I've been privileged to actually work with him. He is a writer, a director, and I might add, a very talented actor. But most recently, he has achieved something that is probably, well, it's amongst the rarest thing that can happen in Hollywood, and that is an actual movie that's a hit in theaters. And it's called 80 for Brady. And with me today is Kyle Marvin, who directed and co-wrote this movie, which I was privileged to be in. Welcome to my little cage here, Kyle. Thanks for joining me. I so appreciate it.
Having me. Yeah, of course. My pleasure.
Yeah. So just tell me right off the bat, what does it feel like to have a hit movie by just the most popular standards that anyone could imagine?
Yeah, I mean it's strange. It's a strange thing. It's sort of like everything in life where you always feel like, when X happens, I'm gonna feel like something. And every time you get there, it doesn't really feel like the thing you expected.
Uh-huh.
But it's you know what I mean? Like I'm certainly really proud of the movie. I'm really proud of who turned up to see the movie, which was an audience that people had sort of said wouldn't come back to movie theaters. And that I think I'm really proud of that it sort of set a message to our industry to just say, like, if you make content that are for the people who you want to have see the movie, they'll show up and see it. So um, it's great. It's awesome. I try and keep an even keel in my life because there's highs and lows in this industry. And so I feel like if I can keep a relatively even keel, I'll be all right. So I'm taking it all in stride.
Good. I've experienced the lows. I've never been quite to the highs. I've been somewhere in the media, you know.
That's how it
Ultimately,
goes.
yeah, ultimately, my experience is the process is the reward. The
Yeah, it's great.
opportunity to make movies is, and just to be in the arena, to fail or succeed, that is the rarest privilege. And I had to learn that lesson a little bit the hard way, but
Yeah.
that is.
Well, it's interesting because every we were talking before this, and it's great because every person who joins you in a movie in every capacity on set, if they all try and bring their best to that position, as lowly as it could be, the PA on set who's like going to do coffee runs, like every person on set adds tremendous value to the overarching production. And that's very true with actors who come really well prepared and who can bring things to that role, because every role is important. Every person, even the people walking in the background, if they understand their motivation and they understand what they're doing and they're doing it naturally, it creates a tapestry that feels natural and organic, and it builds towards a better movie. And um, I think people shouldn't disregard uh, their contributions to a movie, because all of those things matter in the grand scheme of the movie itself. I think they all contribute to the quality of the final product.
Yeah, they're all links in a chain. And by the way, if one of those little links is doesn't work, you see it. It just jumps out and leaps out at you.
That's
And
right. And your movie, you're trying to trick people, in essence. Like, you're trying to convince them that this artifice is real in the moment. And if anything breaks the artifice, and that could be camera work, and that could be sound, and that could be a million things, um, any one of those, cracks in the armor pull them away from fully committing to the project. And so, like, the more that people commit and the more that people live in honesty in those moments, the better the overall.
I think you're probably the first director in cinema history to direct four legends and a goat.
Yeah. I'm sure there's been four legends and a goat, but just not four legends and the goat.
The goat,
Um,
right? Yeah.
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I can
Um,
only
yeah,
imagine what that was like. I mean, if you were intimidated, or will they accept me, or I mean,
yeah, it was intimidating at first, in like those initial conversations when we were sort of like, having the very first conversations and getting their attachments. Those moments feel really precarious because, it's kind of like it's kind of like going on a first date. You know what I mean? You're trying to be authentic. You're trying to put your best foot forward, but ultimately you're going to have to be who you are, and you're going to have to hope that like your relationship works out. And so that part is really daunting. I think once we got into production, they're all such consummate professionals, and the truth is that on a film set, um, everyone wants the same thing, which is a great performance. And so there is immediately shared sort of interest and shared activity towards making a good performance. And so it became more natural pretty quickly. But yes, there were definitely moments where I was like, I'm going to look back on this and think, my God, you know what I mean? I'm like sitting here with these, individuals having this experience, and it was very, it was very magical in that
You know,
way.
I was going over some of the credit lists of Jane, of course, and
Yeah,
I actually had the
yeah,
opportunity to tell her I just saw Clute again, and her performance with Donald Sutherland is so
okay.
exquisite. There's moments where she just takes his hand and they're walking, they're shopping for vegetables, and you go, "Oh my God, they're in love." This and I could just from Jane's movie, some of her. She was such a great comedian early on with Barefoot in the Park, and one of my favorite westerns was Cat Ballou. I don't know if you ever saw that movie.
Oh, I did. I did see Cat Ballou. Yeah, it's a great western.
Yeah,
Shot Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I think some of that.
yes, and I've got Lee Marvin and Oscar. It had
Yeah,
also that movie also had Nat King Cole and Stubby Case singing. At the
that
beginning.
singing. Yeah, that song is iconic. Yeah,
Right. And the Fairley brothers, ripped that off with
of course.
something about Mary. That was just like, okay, I got it, but it's not a rip off, they're sitting on their shoulders.
Yeah,
But
it's an homage or in the tapestry of subconscious
right. And
film
then when I
watching.
saw your movie yesterday, which I really loved, you as an actor in The Climb, with the chapter headings,
All right, we do it too.
The Fortune Cookie. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, but it's just one of my favorite Billy Wilder movies. Also sports related because the guy gets injured at a Cleveland Browns football game. But yeah, I mean, when you think of
That's
some of the
awesome.
directors, Sidney Pollack and just the list goes on with Jane, The Barefoot in the Park. There's so many movies, The China Syndrome, and of course Sally. I thought her performance in your movie was sublime. She just
Yeah.
has an incredible naturalness and belief that was. I kind of thought, in a way, anchored the movie for me in many ways. She.
Yeah, she for sure she has a great gut instinct toward character, and I think she is a force in herself in that she knows creatively where she wants to take something. She has a very like solid, solidified idea in terms of what needs to be done along the way in order to reinforce that. And I think she was a great partner in that sense that she was very confident in um, where she found honesty inside the character, and then what the priorities were in terms of her delivery, her line delivery. And I think she's spectacular in that sense.
Yeah, she was great. Inspired casting with her husband Bob Balaban, who
Yeah, he's the best.
he's I think
I love Bob Balaban.
his uncle was a like a major studio executive in Hollywood history.
Yeah, I remember hearing that at some point when
Oh
we
yeah,
were
Balaban I think was head of Paramount. Um,
made.
yeah,
Very cool.
and I actually think his great uncle, I'm not sure there was the basis for What Makes Sammy Run, the novel, which was. Yeah, so he's intertwined. And of course, I think about Sally Fields, I think about, of course, Norma Ray and Smokey and the Bandit,
Yeah,
but her relationship with one of the great directors for actors, Martin Ritt, she
yeah.
who did, I believe, did that movie, and and then Rita is in perhaps the most influential movie that I've ever seen for me, especially for the one I directed, which was Carnal Knowledge. I mean, with
Yeah.
Mike Nichols. That's like, I think your movie too had some
I mean,
influence.
carnal knowledge was definitely a reference for us, and it's funny because I talked to Rita about carnal knowledge too on set because it's a favorite of mine as well, and I was sort of like, what was it? I was trying to like glean, get some insight from her of like what that whole experience was like because it was such and then her role in it is so surreal and wild, and so we had a great conversation about that.
Yeah, and then I'm just see these are all the rivers that flow now into you
Yeah.
because then with the last Lily, I think about the breakthrough movie for her, which was Robert Altman's Nashville,
Yep.
which was almost like reinventing a kind of filmmaking of half improv, half.
Yeah, that sort of verite, the camera drifts to the audience and you hear someone talking in your left ear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, some of that freedom you had in the climb, but I felt like in 80 for Brady, you were obviously constrained because you had to prepare a movie that would match seamlessly with a Super Bowl that had occurred. It was 217, but it was the championship for the season of 2016.
Correct.
That most memorable of comebacks in NFL history.
Yeah.
Where so talk about just how you had to prepare to seamlessly make that work.
Yeah, I mean there were two sides to it. One was the visual side because um we had to convince the NFL to agree to let us have the footage, and Tom Brady helped a lot in that sense. And then we had to sort of see what we had in terms of footage. We had to try and understand and dig deep into their archives, and we flew to New Jersey and went to NFL Films and went with their archivist through the old hard drive or the old storage. They have a really robust system for archiving their things. And we went back through all the footage and looked at all the plays, and they have numerous cameras. I mean, I think in this one we had 12 cameras that we were using. So we could see things from 12 different perspectives. Aside from a couple roving cameras. And so it had a lot to do with the visual language. What did we have visually? And then story wise, it was sort of trying to align um, everyone's needs at the same moment. Our characters' needs, Tom Brady's needs, the movie's needs, and try and put it all sort of try and get it worked out so it all lined up in the same moment in a way that felt like everyone benefits from this sort of peak moment, or everyone has their lesson to learn together instead of it being sort of one directional uh, or like a one note thing. So that was really the challenge for us, was how do you line up everyone's stories within the context of a real thing, and how do you visually map the real footage back into our story, and how does our camera language integrate naturally into that setting. And so all those things it's a bit of a puzzle piece in terms of figuring all those components out, but I think in the end we pulled it off.
Well, what I was doing my little part there, with the green screen, looking at
Yeah.
all this stuff, there was a lot of screen direction that you had to have thought out which direction the plays are going, which end zone is being defended, which is being attacked. And also just the specific moment in the game, all had to be prefigured. And
Yeah.
you did a
There was a
really good
lot.
job.
Yeah, there was a lot of that sort of stuff we had figured out, and I think it's one of the big things to as a director you're constantly tracking, which is really how do things fit together, is sort of like the director's job, because everyone lives in the moment and everyone's trying to do their best work in the moment, and your job as a director is sort of to be a step back from it all, trying to play the whole thing out on every side. And so a lot of it had to do with me trying to identify, you know, what the footage we were going to do is, what we were going to shoot in 4 days, which was the return on that, and how how the line was placed and how we covered it and all those things. I mean, it's part of the challenge of directing, really, is just managing a lot of that prediction.
And just on the storytelling level, and you alluded to this, you have four basic main characters, and they each have their own little back issue. Like Sally's trying to break out of expand or whatever with her marriage, and Jane and reconcile her own beauty, and it was just beautiful. And I wanted to just say this: I felt that the movie had a sort of some deeper currents as well, in terms of an answer to how people get discounted for their full humanity as they edge into their elderhood. So
It was one of the challenges. I mean, it's really tricky because in a movie like this, you've got four stories that you're trying to not give short shrift to. Like in a traditional sense, you have your protagonist and everyone else sort of like supports them and their stories are sort of anecdotal at best. And I think the challenge for this one is we had 90-ish minutes to pull off four as complete backstories as we could pull off while this incredible amount of plot had to happen and you had a whole Super Bowl to get to and play out. And so part of the challenge for us was like how to most potently examine things and try and give a little bit more meat and potatoes to each of the characters, while still trying to make it a comedy, give the big comedy set pieces, have a Super Bowl happen, and do all of these things. So it was a bit of a challenge in terms of how to compress and give everyone as much as possible while still keeping, the freight train moving at high speed so that it felt like a movie you'd watch in a movie theater.
Well, and just to add to that, because you're working now within the studio system, you were one of the things I enjoy about studio movies historically is that they're about storytelling efficiency.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing less of that. A lot of it's just by these long form things where how do we make it longer? Like the limited series with unlimited dialogue. How do they do this? This isn't Tar, but you manage to work seemingly satisfy your bosses and the larger demands of commercial movie making.
Yeah.
And
It's a lost art. A 90-minute movie is a lost art, I think. I mean, if you look back at the mid 30s and you look at those movies, and some of them are 58 minutes long and they're masterpieces, and you're like, oh wow, they do great work in character, they have great world building, and it's 58 minutes long, like and so I think there's an art to doing a compressed movie. And I wouldn't put myself up there on the shelf with those ones, but I do think that they're, I admire and would love to try and do something. And again, 58 minutes is maybe too small because
yeah,
I'd like to take my time. But there is a beauty to being able to do it in a compressed space and sort of carving and carving and carving until you get what you want. The director's cut of 80 for Brady, I think was like 2 hours and 20 minutes. It was a like I put it all in there, and it was like the long, slow jokes, as slow as I could go. Um, and actually, we cut more scenes out than we cut them down. We cut like more fat off the bone than we did like lose a little bit of the pathos of
hmm
the jokes. Um, but I think certainly it's a more palatable movie. It's a more enjoyable watch as it stands now than my director's cut. You probably slogged through a couple scenes thinking like, okay, I'm done. You know what I mean? I've had my I've had my fill of this scene.
Well, what do they say? Brevity is the soul of filmmaking.
Yeah,
So you
yeah,
did a great job. This was the antidote to a movie like Tar,
yes.
which is it's
Yeah, which
like
lingered, which I love. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of European cinema, and so like
too.
I'll sit through those movies, where like 4 hours in, you're like, wait, are we at the midpoint yet? Uh,
Yeah. Well,
but
my grandfather was in the distribution business at Warner Brothers. My grandfather, I will say this, he was president of Warner Brothers. He started in 1927, but he never made a movie. He sold them.
yeah,
And their concerns was, well, we got to rotate that. We want 5 plays a day or whatever.
yeah,
There were real concerns. They
yeah,
didn't have an open-ended video and streaming life to recoup their investment. But now I want to say this to the people that watch is I want to talk about The Climb, which I thought was a great movie.
yeah.
And I met you, and you're distracted directing, and I didn't have a chance to really say anything to you or talk to you. I wanted to be a successful widget in your factory, and nothing burps on Bill. Just we keep going, and one more link in that chain. But you are an inspired actor, and that performance in that movie and your collaboration with Mr. Cavino uh, was inspired, and I just wanted that to be said. And I don't know. I mean, I'm a comedian, actor, writer. I don't put boundaries. It's whatever door opens, I will charge through.
Yeah.
Um, I spread my rejection around without hesitation.
Yeah.
But I just wanted you to talk about your journey as an actor, because clearly that had to give you some cred with those actresses.
Yeah, yeah, and we I did a show called We Crush, which came out right as our movie was coming out, and I think the actresses, we would talk about it on set because it was sort of happening in real time, and that definitely, I think, actors seeing actors act who are it changes the conversation because there is a sort of like a shared we're in the trenches, you know what it's like to like, be in a scene and be floundering in a moment and needing the support, of something else or of some physical action or things to help you through. So I think that shorthand helped a lot. In terms of my journey, I came up through commercial production. I've always loved acting. I did it when I was younger, and but it really felt unattainable to me when I sort of started my life in the working world. And I had kids young, and I had to work, and so I was in commercial production. I just ran a production company and made my money by shooting whatever I could shoot. And on the side, because I was savvy with production, we owned cameras, and I knew how to set a production together. We just became producers by default, and we were surrounded by such talented people. We just sort of let them do the work, and we supported them. And the climb came about because the truth is we would mess around all the time. We had the cameras. We'd set up for like a beauty setup, and we'd have a white psych with like all the things, and we'd do that. And at the end of the day, we'd have 2 hours, and we would just, can I swear on your podcast?
You can say whatever you want,
We would
man.
just fuck around. We
Yeah.
would, we would do whatever we wanted. We'd be like, great, what's a funny thing we can do in this thing? Great, put two chairs out there, and we got a pumpkin, put a pumpkin in there. And it's like, all right, improv. Or we would do all sorts of stuff. So we were constantly playing with the tools we had, and just messing around, like you said. And we were sort of punching up into the world of indie film. We made, I produced 3 or 4 by the time we hit the climb. And so we were just sort of always playing, and I knew like acting is hard. It's hard work. It's hard work to do auditions. You prep for them, you work hard, you do it, and like, hey, my hat's in the bag, and it could be some casting associate just passes you over by chance. You could be the perfect thing. Like it's just a wild roller coaster of a ride. And so for me, the climb was a chance for me to just put myself in something because no one else was casting me. No one else was going to put me in something. And so we just said, great, we want to do the thing we want to do. And people responded to the short film, which we shot in between a car commercial and a beauty commercial over a
Oh, yeah.
weekend.
Wow.
And then that short got us traction, and that short became the feature film. Um, and so that was sort of my trajectory, was just trying to build it on my own and continue to play with my friends, on the things that we thought were fun and interesting. And one of them hit. There's lots of not funny things that people don't like, you know what I mean, or never responded to. And I think part of the lesson there is exactly what you said, which is just be willing to fail and try and play around and not treat anything like it's a condemnation of your creative impulse, just that it didn't align at the moment. You know what I mean? And so to just keep experimenting and poking around, and something eventually will pop.
Well, I will say, just talking about the climb, because I saw it yesterday. There was one of the chapters was it was either the Thanksgiving or the Christmas,
Yeah.
and you cannot do those kind of shots
Yeah.
unless they're well planned. I mean, the mise en scène from those things with I'm reminded of like Hannah and her sisters and those beautiful scenes that Woody Allen directs in apartments and
Yep.
enclosed places. I mean, those things have to be choreographed to a
Very
very.
choreographed. Yeah, and what was interesting, and the beauty of writing your own role is that Mike and I both wrote it together and were in it as the leads, and so we knew the dialogue. Like we had workshopped those scenes over and over and over and over again, and we would perform them with each other, just in our office, to try and workshop them through and whittle them down and wear off the edges. And then the priority just became getting everyone else on board. And we did a lot of tech scouting, a lot of like prep work, a lot of diagramming, just so we understood, because there's so many things moving in those stuff. Like, where does the sound guy go? Where are the mics planted? Where are the extras going in this moment? How do you coordinate interior action with exterior camera work when the camera work outside is inconsistent because it's on
Mhm.
a dolly and who knows when it's going to hit the window, and so like all of those pieces were sort of had to be really refined. And the way we did that movie was we did 1 day of prep with everyone where
Mhm.
the actors weren't in costume, but everyone was there doing the scenes. And then we would just run it, and then we reviewed at night to sort of like see the timing and figure out if there was any gaps with our technical team. And then the next day we would just run the scene back to back, run it, and eventually we everyone just got a cadence. And then on take 5, 6, 10, we would say, got it, we nailed it, everything was in place. And then we would push even further as far as we could, and then we'd be done. And then be like, great, we either got the scene or we didn't, but we'd know in 2 days. Every one of those things took 2 days, one prep, one shoot day, and then we would just march through all those productions.
And then I guess it wasn't the last scene; it was the penultimate chapter when you get married. And I was thinking, okay, is this The Graduate? All
Yeah.
right, where Benjamin's coming in, or but he didn't come in. You guys went out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It was a little bit of a twist on what happens.
Yeah.
It's funny too, because like we were talking about every piece in the puzzle, every cog is important. Really, in those scenarios, it's exactly true because all the background, everyone had to be so coordinated because you don't want to be the one 12 minutes and 45 seconds into a continuous take to flub your line, or or the guy holding the bounce board to step 2 inches to his left and get in the frame. And so, that really felt like a team effort. And it was fun because everyone felt the pressure. Everyone feels the pressure in when a scene is rolling, but really everyone feels the pressure when you're running long takes and no one wants to be the one to mess it up.
Well, there's some just beauty to that in cinema. Uh,
Totally.
Sometimes my own experience is an actor will give you a performance. Sometimes an actor will give you a puzzle, and then you have to piece it together.
Yeah.
And that movie really demanded performances and not a puzzle.
Yeah, and I think, I very much, and I say this without enough experience to say this, I very much think that I want, um, I'm okay with experimentation. I'm okay with like finding different things or playing around with moments. But I think the thing that can't be variable is character motivation and character journey. And those things I think have to be constants, because I think if an actor plays from a clear, consistent character motivation in the scene,
Mhm.
actions can be variable, but yet it will still come out the same as in the edit. You'll know where you're starting, it'll feel consistent, and you'll know where you're headed. And so I think it's really important to have conversations with my actors about motivation, desire, needs, obstacle, as a priority for characters in a given scene, because as long as those are consistent, the movie stays whole. I think where movies get into trouble is if they're like, well, try this one like you're mad. Try this
Yeah.
one like you're off in the corner and you're just not paying attention. And I think if you do that without a clear character motivation being the constant in that moment, you end up getting, sort of things that feel disjointed, or things where you're not really engaged with the emotional journey. And I think that's more important in comedy than anything else. I think in comedy, because of the improv nature of our contemporary comedy, of the multicam, sort of like crack a joke and who can outdo each other in the improv in the moment, which is fine and fun and has its value. I think we've maybe lost sight a little bit in the grand scheme. I think there's a lot of people who are staying the course, but in the grand scheme, I think we've lost a little track of the fact that character motivation in comedy is even more important. I think, to keep in mind as you put a movie together.
My favorite movie of all time is The Apartment.
Right.
And you to see the things you just spoke about, where you
Yeah.
see the great jokes, the
Yeah.
beautiful setup and payoff, the mise en scène, the use of props,
Yeah.
the conception with the writing, and the deep themes at the core of it, with tragedy and comedy like on the same razor's edge. To
Yeah.
me, that's my favorite movie of all time for
It's a
that
great,
reason.
it's a great movie, and I think exactly to that point. I think you're exactly right.
Right. So like they say in Casablanca, the fundamental things always apply, and that's like logic, character. Kind of goes back to Stanislavski and all the acting school stuff.
Yeah.
Quick question I have: you sometimes actors don't want to hear that shit. Like, fuck, my motivation is to get my health insurance back.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Which has been a big motivation for me actually in my career
Yeah.
to keep it, get it back, please. And so when you're dealing with people that have been on Mount Olympus, with Oscars, and Rita's gotten them all. She's got the whole the MVP thing going. How willing or able or eager were they to have those kind of conversations and interaction with you?
They all were completely willing and interested. I think all of them prioritized it. I think if you get to the point on a set where you say what's your motivation and someone says money, I think that you've lost them. You know what I mean? And I
Right.
think if you can keep, I think all actors want to do great work fundamentally. You know what I mean? Just like all artists want to do the best work they can. And I think when they feel like they're unable to do their best work, they'll check out, and you'll lose the potency of that moment. And I think it's very incumbent on me as a director to continue to consult their interest and willingness in order to keep them engaged with the characters in the moment. And I think in the sense of like, what's my motivation in the scene is sort of like the generic, like, the TV movie director statement. If you were like, oh, he's a director and he's telling them what their motivation is. But the truth is that it really is at the core of everything. And it is a very fundamental truth. And I think if someone really cares about what's happening in that moment in the performance, it's the most anchoring concept for an actor to just say, great, what I really want in this moment is to go to the bathroom. Like
Mhm.
that's my motivation right now. I want to go pee, and this guy keeps telling me a long list of everyone who's coming to the party, and it's like, go. And it's just like, that's a perfect potent moment for comedy, because that's all that really matters. If I said, okay, he's going to read a list to you and you just feel awkward, it just doesn't have the same resonance. And so I think that's sort of my lens always to um to think with.
What's actable? Is those things you can't act a result.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, you have to act a motivation. You have to act a, a thought.
Yeah, and I think the key for me is to be completely imbued in the circumstances of whatever the situation is,
Yeah.
to give it whatever truth you can. I mean, in the case of the 80 for Brady, for my little moment or moments, was this is the actual most desperate moment of this contest. This series, if they get a first down, it's over. So
Right.
we are as concentrated and focused on trying to, and then what's unanticipated, of course, is what happens. But
Right.
my movie's this game,
Yeah. Right.
and and actually they were getting slaughtered
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that
Totally.
game.
In that moment. Yeah. And
Yeah,
what's crazy, what's interesting is that it's one of the reasons I responded to what you were doing in your tape, was because if you had a character in that scenario who is self-aware of the joke and sort of waiting for the joke of Jane Fonda to interrupt him and sort of hammed up a like, whoa, a thing, it kills the joke, because what makes it funny is how focused you are on your thing being interrupted by this person, and your response to her invading into your privacy is a really genuine response. And that's, people find that moment funny because you're so convicted, you have so much conviction towards the real task at hand. And I think that that's the, for me, when I'm sort of finding or flagging people, I try and find the people who are chasing the real scene, because that's the funniest version of the scene. It's not the comedian who's really good at stand up, who, like, I know can ham it up and wink at the camera.
that's
I
me. Stand up, 10, 20, 30 years stand up, but
but stand up, but not stand up in the sense that you have the deadpan flat version of it. You know what I mean? And so I think that what I'm always searching for are people who have conviction in their scenes, because that's where real comedy comes from. Real comedy comes from belief in what you're doing is real. It's, it's clowns basically. You're just saying we're all clowns, and clowns are completely committed to the universe in which they live. They're trying to get into a tiny fire truck, and it's too small for them, and that's hilarious, but they don't think so. You know.
Right, right. So you can't. You, that's why the circumstances are the guideposts of the of whatever it is. You did a great job. One, my own story is I directed a feature that I wrote, The Solar Opposite, um, and I've written 9 others,
Yep.
and they're all highly representative of the best part of me. But getting those to the back into the arena has been highly
Hard.
challenging. And
Yeah.
one of the things I was like, this is his first film,
Yeah.
and he gets a studio picture with with the you add those resumes together, you pretty much have the greatest all-star cast in movies of all time, plus the greatest football player of all time, which is inarguable.
Yeah.
Like, that's
How?
one of the great Hollywood survival stories I've ever heard of.
Yeah, I
Yours.
mean, the truth is that, I put in close to a decade of hard work in indie film in order
Uh-huh.
to get that opportunity, so it all feels like somewhat overnight success, but the reality is like we're all fighting. I have scripts that I've been trying to sell forever too. Like it's sort of one of those things where um it's weird to say it because it's like persistence pays off, because sometimes persistence doesn't pay off, but all you can do is keep trying. You know what I mean? Like, what do you say to someone other than like keep trying and keep working? And I think the key thing is to keep doing the things that make you happy, and the things that you feel are your integrity towards your creative process, the things that you think are fun and important. And if you hold true to those things, eventually something will pop. And if it doesn't, at least you feel like you've contributed your small things to a small community, but it felt like you being authentically you. And I think that's the best we can do, is just to continue to do the things that we find entertaining and interesting, and put them out in the world.
Right. Well, you did a great job on the movie, and I'm relating to you now as this really subversively talented comic actor as well. And congratulations to that. And I mean, thanks for putting me in the movie, man.
Yeah, yeah.
I've
You did a
made a
great job.
no,
You did a
thanks.
great job.
I
I
knew
love
I knew I couldn't be cut out, because I go, this is the key moment. I mean, they
Yeah,
can
you're
cut
in
the
it.
dancers out. They can't cut this moment out.
That's right. You got it. You were in for sure. No, it was great working with you. And again, I think it really resonated. Your commitment to the role really resonated, and I think paid off. It paid dividends for me,
Oh, thank
in your
you.
execution.
Oh, you're so sweet, Kyle. I really enjoyed the process, and just being there with the ladies, and each one was, very interesting and unique as just people to me in their own right. And you think about Jane. I had this little moment where she was standing as we were prepping the scene, and I'm, because of the circumstance, I'm sitting, and she's 80 something, and I go, "Would you just like to sit down?" She goes, "No, I'm a trooper." And I just, yeah, you are, and and what I saw? I saw her father too. I saw Young Man, Mr. Lincoln, and the Joad family, and the
Yeah.
Lady Eve, another great movie. Oh my God, the Preston Sturges comedy. Um,
Yeah, it's funny. We talked about Preston Sturges a bunch. She loves Preston Sturges, and I happen to have an affinity towards it, towards his work, and we hit it off on Preston in our first conversation.
oh brother, where art thou?
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
The great movie from Sullivan's Travels.
Right.
Veronica Lake was so beautiful in that movie. My jaw drops. It's just, it's
Yeah,
such.
he was doing something really special. Those are some of those early, cinema films that are just like um, profound pieces of work.
And yes, they're funny, but they always cut to some very deep social concerns, generally about class and even race. In the movie Sullivan's Travels,
Totally.
the
Yeah, it's about poverty in America. You're traveling through things that people generally didn't film. Like you're not filming the side of railroad tracks where people are starving for food.
the black church where they watch the cartoon, where he comes to understand the beauty of comedy. I mean,
What's interesting is that there was a lot of social commentary, which I think is always part and parcel of cinema. But it's done in a way that I think it travels the path of it and doesn't necessarily overly dictate what you should or shouldn't think in the moment. And the funny thing is, I think I hope most people walk away with the same sense of empathy and understanding from that film without the need to sort of like put it into a framework that feels like you're being fed something. I think the beauty of his movies is he laid it out for you and put your feet on the path and made you empathize with people who needed empathy in that moment.
right, the old joke about Hollywood. You got a message, call Western Union, okay? Get that stuff off the screen, and you did it too in 80 for Brady,
Yeah,
because we do live in a society today where we get people of a certain age get disposed, they get shuttled into senior living centers or
yeah,
elderly orgy hostels, whichever you'd like to call them.
I like that.
I thought there was a little bit of that kind of perhaps going on, and
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
We did a nod to that in the
yeah, but you did that, and it was subtle, and it was something that was still there. And we see it also in Hollywood,
yeah,
our own movies.
yeah,
And this movie was loaded with special effects. 80 for Brady was. The special effects were human emotion, fun dialogue, and empathy,
yeah,
which comes across, even to the most people that are living right at the absolute on Mount Olympus. By that, of course, Tom Brady and our football stars, they were reached. And I just want to congratulate you on so many levels. First, for casting me,
yeah.
and two, for the movie and the incredible act of juggling all these balls, and of all the stories and the technical challenges, and creating a tapestry where you believe the Super Bowl. Um, and Man, just good luck, Kyle. Anything that I could tell my agent to look out for in the future, on the call?
Yeah, no, you know how it is in Hollywood, 1,000 spinning plates. So maybe one of those plates falls soon, and then we can talk.
Okay, well, congratulations, and just a super thanks for joining me. I had meant to do extend an invitation to you, and I reached out to some other, and I finally hit pay dirt. So I want to thank you again, and
Yeah, my
great
pleasure.
work.
My
Yeah.
pleasure.
All right, folks. Well, I want to sign off here and thank Kyle. And as I always do, offer my sign off word, and that is namaste, shalom, and aloha. By that, I mean namashaloha. See ya.